On one hand, it's the fairy tale, you're a Wrexham fan. Bloody hell, you could never expect this. You're in Dreamland. On the other hand, they've just kind of bought their way up the pyramid. I mean, where do we sit on those two things?
It's interesting because the Brazil national team job is the Real Madrid of international football. And if you're trying to just tick off all of those boxes on the football management list, you're saying that you could hear the noise 5 kilometres away of the Monumental.
Yeah.
That's bonkers for it to ripple across a busy city like that, isn't it? That is...
Is that even possible?
I don't know.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 42, I believe, with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. It is 8 a.m. in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The sun is coming up from the high-rise buildings to my right-hand side, and Mr. Oliver Wilson is on what must be, mate, holiday number 7 of the year, and it's only April. What a life he leads.
Mate, most of it's working holidays. This is actually one for pure enjoyment more than anything else. But I'm keeping it... Obviously, I knew we were doing the podcast this week, so I'm keeping it very sporting indeed. I'm just round the corner from the home of golf, St Andrews. I'm on the other side of the Scottish coastline, across the Firth, and I'm on the beautiful golf links of Carnoustie, which is hoping many an Open Championship, and is perhaps the golf course with one of the most famous finishes to Open history ever. When Raymond van der Velde knocked his ball into the water, had a 3-shot lead going into the 18th, and he tried to take on the first burn and got over it, and then almost went into the rough.
97?
I think 98. I think 98, but I'm not 100% sure.
Ollie, how many hours of therapy? This is a genuine question. How many hours of therapy did Jean van der Velde need to be able to put his head on the pillow at night and see the bigger picture that life is fleeting and what happened and it is what it is? I mean, how many hours of therapy did he need to get to that point? Because that was, to this day, that was the biggest bottle job I've ever seen.
Yeah, but there is a documentary about it which has him talking about how he didn't really need that much therapy afterwards. He kind of just accepted it as part of golf, and this is one of the miserable things that happens, and he's frustrated with himself and the decisions that he made. But whether that's being said just for a documentary or not, I don't know. But I personally would need... I need hours of therapy after a half-decent golf round. So to have history on the line and to balls it all up in that moment. I mean, there's a great comment from the commentator. I think it was Peter Ellis who was on the call that day. He's on his, what I think is his 4th shot, because he went bad off the tee box, badly into the grandstand with his 2nd shot, then tried to take it over the burn and put it in the water. And so I think his 4th, counting for 5, is Peter Ellis just goes, well, he lost his golfing brain about 20 minutes ago. So who knows what's going through his head right now? And it's like, it's so true. Every single person watching that Open in 99 kind of went, well, you just lay up. You've got 3 shots for a tie, 2-shot lead, and you're sorted. You can double bogey.
But thank God he didn't, because then we have the moment that we do. And, maybe he was okay to get over it because it is only sport, not another sports pod. Not another sports pod. Well, I don't know, man. It is just sport. Let me just dive in with some good stuff, Ollie, first of all. Weekend yesterday, it's the Super Classico, River Plate against Boca Juniors. And where I am staying in Buenos Aires is not so far from the Monumental. And Mastantuono, the teenager, scores a free kick for River. And Ollie, I can hear the noise of the Monumental ripple from the Monumental, which is, I don't know, man, 1.5 miles from where I am to down to past Belgrano to the stadium, something like that.
Yeah,
at least.
Definitely further, yeah.
Yeah, maybe further, maybe it's 2 miles, but I don't know how, but the noise carries to, it's 85,000 people, and it carries across to Palermo, so you can actually hear the noise from the Monumental when River score, which is just totally insane. And by the way, River Plate Stadium holds 85,000. We talked about this before and not another sports pod, but Ollie, it's it's 3 years on the spin that they haven't that they've sold out every game for 3 years on a spin. 85,000 in a country where 40% of people live in poverty. Absolutely bonkers commitment to the cause. So that was that. I also want to call you out, Ollie, because the WhatsApps were coming in to me from our loyalist fans on Not Another Sports Pod saying there is no way Ollie Wilson could do 100 holes of golf in one day. I don't know enough about golf. How many minutes per hole? Like, you didn't even respond to me on WhatsApp with my mate calling you out. So you tell me, Ollie, that
he's
it
dead
is
to
possible.
me. That man is dead to me, and he better.
No, he's not. Keep listening, James. Keep listening.
No, James, if you're not a believer, I don't want you on this bandwagon, mate. You don't get to enjoy the good times and slag us off when you think it's going to be the hard times. No, if he wants to stump up 50p a hole, then if he doesn't think I'll do 100 holes, and if he wants to stump up 50p a hole, I'll show him a very thank you very much for a £50 check when we get done, because I will take that money and give it all to Prostate Cancer Research UK.
And what about you do 50p a hole, Ollie, for every hole?
Yeah,
you fall
100%.
short?
I'll do £1 a hole for every hole, I'm sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Oh, we could be cooking here. We could. Will they keep the golf course open for you no matter what?
Yeah.
How?
It's until you can't see the ball anymore. That's how the course generally works anyway.
But I mean, the golf course
closes. Yeah, but you can have
right?
tee times at 7 o'clock. If you say that an average 4-ball takes 4 hours a round, they won't shut the course until at least 9, 9:30 anyway. So, yeah, I'll be going from 4:30, 5 a.m. till 9, 9:30 in the evening. So, there's plenty of time to do it. So, yeah.
All right.
Can I just say, Dave?
All right, we're going to squeeze an awful lot into the next 45 minutes. Ollie's got his hand up, which rarely happens. It must be important.
You're saying that you could hear the noise 5 kilometres away of the Monumental.
Yeah.
That's bonkers for it to ripple across a busy city like that, isn't it? That is...
Is that even possible?
I don't know. I don't know.
Unless there's... I mean, that's what I heard, man. I heard the crowd from Mastantuono's goal. That's what I heard.
That is pretty incredible. And I'm not saying that in a I don't believe you. I'm saying that in a... I mean, it brings me to an idea I was thinking about of like, where is the home of football, and a city that you go to and you feel that it's all about football, which you could argue London and everything. But, you know, the number of shirt sellers you see in places like Italy, there are places that I'd argue Buenos Aires has to be up there of one of those places that you go there and it just feels like a football city, because you can't take a taxi ride without going past a stadium anyway. And then to hear something like that echo across a great city like Buenos Aires, across 5 kilometres almost, is... yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And Ollie, if you think, we once had a barbecue at our friend Joel's house, who was probably 2 or 3 kilometres away from the stadium. It's like between where I am now and the stadium, and we could really hear the noise from the goal going there. So yeah, and I've just asked ChatGPT. Yes, very loud sounds like explosions, fireworks, big stadium crowds, factory blasts, or thunder can be heard from 5 kilometres or even farther away, depending on blah 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 blah. So yeah, there it is. Ollie, so much to get through on the pod today, mate. I want to talk to you about something that has never happened before in the history of football that happened in the Libertadores last week. I want to talk about El Clasico in Spain, the Copa del Rey final, which turned into just an absolute mess with Antonio Rudiger throwing things at the referee. It was fantastic. I want to talk about, loads of other stuff, mate. But we should probably start with Liverpool Premier League champions.
Yeah, and I think it's... There are cynical moments where I've definitely been overly cynical about sport in general, but genuinely one of the beautiful pictures of football is seeing the Kop at Anfield actually able to celebrate a title victory. Did it in emphatic fashion, of course, against Tottenham, who never really showed up, particularly after the first 25 minutes or so in that game. And yeah, it is a great footballing stadium. The Kop is one of those iconic footballing stands of world football, and the noise and the banners that are still on there are a little harken back to better times. I think when you think about the less sanitized fan experience that you get now in world football in general, and to see it, every single person holding a scarf, a flag, a banner, a shirt of some sort, with the players just applauding in front of it, was incredible. And considering the last trophy lift was behind closed doors of COVID, it's for a Premier League title. Liverpool fans finally get to have that moment connected to their team. And whatever you think about Liverpool, whether you're an Everton fan, a Manchester United fan, or whatever, you can't say that isn't a beautiful scene in modern day football.
Let me just talk very briefly on this. I think there's 3 points to make about Liverpool winning the title, and I want to frame it in the past, the present, and the future. The past is Jurgen Klopp, and one of the best bits of life advice you could ever receive is leave things and people better than you found them. It's just difficult to do, right? Try and leave a place, a person, a situation. Try to leave it marginally better than how you found it. And that's exactly what Jurgen Klopp did, which in football management is incredibly hard to do, but he did achieve that. Usually, Ollie, I mean, let's say in well over 70, 80% of cases, because coaches get sacked, coaches leave, managers leave football clubs in a mess of like arguments and failed transfers and poor seasons and internal rifts and this kind of stuff. So it's so rare for a coach to actually leave a football club and be like, there you go, it's in a fantastic shape from top to bottom. There you go, like here's your opportunity. And that's what Jurgen Klopp did. He left things better than he found them. And I think that can never be underestimated. And there'll be people that say, oh, Jurgen Klopp should have stayed another season or two to squeeze another big trophy out of this squad, which is Jurgen Klopp's squad, let's be real. But he did something even more profound, probably, which is he just left it in this incredible shape, which just so rarely happens. So that's the past. The present is the fact that Arne Slot came in and he did what the first thing that a football manager should do, which is actually coach players. And we've talked about this before and not another sports pod. But I mean, the fact that he turned Ryan Gravenberch into a disappointing transfer into one of the best central midfield players in the league. Yes, that's on the player too, but it's also on Arne Slot. He squeezed goals out of Gakpo and Diaz that people never thought were possible, really. You know, Mo Salah's Mo Salah. He was scoring goals before Arne Slot, and he'll score goals in the future. But he's still, you know, he's going to chalk up the second best season of his career under Arne Slot. So he actually coached players, calm head, never reacted to like the transfer situation with Van Dijk and Salah and Trent. So that was the present. That's how they won the league, really, through consistency. And the future, something that popped into my head yesterday, Ollie, that I think is very, very, very rare, right? We're now April the 28th recording this. Liverpool will not play another competitive game until the middle of August, 3.5 months' time. They've got 4 Premier League games that don't matter. You've got June where everyone's off. July, which is pre-season. And then the Premier League season kicks off middle of August. All right, Community Shield's 1 week before. How often, Ollie, does a side that wins the league have 3.5 months with no competitive action? As in, normally there's a World Cup or you're fighting for an FA Cup final or Champions League end of the season, something like this. We got the Club World Cup this summer. So it struck me that the likes of Virgil van Dijk, Mo Salah, the players over 30 in that squad, and everyone, they now have a proper, genuine break. And I think that puts Liverpool in a fantastic position for next season. In the sense, Ollie, that Manchester City and Chelsea, they'll be fighting till the very end of the season in the top 5 scrap. Then they're off at the Club World Cup. Obviously, great to be in the Club World Cup, but that takes you out for June and maybe early July. So a lot of these clubs, and next summer, for example, you've got the African Cup of Nations next January. Then you've got the biggest World Cup ever in 2026. Like, these players are not going to have a break. No top player is going to have a break now for the next, over a year. But Liverpool players will do. And so I wonder for Arne Slot, he'll go into the start of next season. Let's say Trent goes, he's kept everyone else, brings in 1 or 2. And I think they'll be joint favourites, if not favourites, to win the league next season. So I think it's very rare to get essentially 3.5 months off. Next 4 Premier League games, Arne Slot, if he wants, he can bring in some of the youth players, give players some minutes, try and raise the transfer fee of maybe 1 or 2 that he's going to sell, Harvey Elliott, etc. So yeah, that's my past, present, and future. But what can you say? Liverpool 20 league titles and champions.
Yeah, and the respite is really important. But you've also got Arne Slot now has got 3 months to analyse and work out A, who are the pieces to bring in, and B, how to bring the correct pieces in over the next summer of the transfer window. And he's still got games that he can give a bit of extra game time to some fringe players, periphery players, maybe try something a little different in the last few weeks of this season. It's a great piece of time to have, not just as a footballer, but as a manager as well. And the fact he's sat now on a Premier League title, Arne Slot knows there's zero pressure on his job. He's not going into a summer thinking, well, am I going to be here? Where am I going to be? Etc. It's a prime position for the players to rest, but also for Slot to start to tinker again a little bit more. And because he said that we're going to need to bring in new blood, Slot has. So he's not a denier of that fact. And I think he probably welcomes it as well, and the idea of maybe starting to cultivate a side that is more his and less of that Klopp handover, which you never know. That might needle him a little bit, because Klopp, as you touched on at the very beginning of this, he's still getting a lot of the credit for this. Arne Slot is seen as the great tinker man who's come in and put all these pieces and made sure it's gone back up to a level that was expected. But there's still a lot of people going, this is Klopp's foundation. This is Klopp's team.
Yeah, but Arne Slot basically thanked Klopp on the pitch at Anfield yesterday. So yeah, I do take your point. Maybe deep
There's
down,
got to be a
there's something
little
like that,
bit.
but I think it's just
The
more of a
the competitiveness.
It is what it is. Honest Lot inherited something perfect.
The competitive nature of football managers, and maybe it's different with obviously managers on the continent and between manager to manager. But I think in general, the competitive nature of managers is the idea of like you want to do something yourself. And I don't take any credit away from Arne Slot at all for this, because who knows what Jurgen Klopp would have done with this same group of players and whether they'd have been able to fight for a title or not. And there'll be people that will bring up the caveat of City's collapse this year and all that kind of stuff. And none of that I see as an asterisk at all against what Arne Slot's done. But I'm just saying, I imagine it would still sting a little bit to be the guy that has put all this together, done this, and people go, yeah, great job that Jurgen Klopp did to step away and give you the reins of such a great team, and then you've added to it a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. I think he'll enjoy the fact that he's got 3 and a bit months to start to piece together his own side as well, and get the opportunity to bring in some blood of some sort, whether it's backup positions or whether it's filling in for the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and whatever's going to happen over the summer with that. So,
one thing I would say is, Ollie, let's say Liverpool win the league next year, I think that Arne Slot will absolutely put more weight on that, if not externally, then internally. He'll say, yeah, that was my title. And whatever happens next season, that will be his team, that'll be his team, I think.
Is there a football manager who's walked away like Jurgen Klopp has done and left the side in a better position that you can think of?
I mean,
Cruyff at Barca, maybe, because he started what eventually became the thing that we all love about Pep Guardiola. Like Sir Alex Ferguson didn't leave at that point. He left when he'd stretched a bad United side as much as it could go, more than anything else. If he'd wanted to do that, it was probably to leave about 5-6 years earlier. Would be the way to go. I'm struggling to think of other managers that have left when everything's been in place for somebody else to come in and succeed to a similar level.
I mean, mate, just so unbelievably brave. And I'm just thinking now, I mean, any coach that leaves one of the top clubs in Spain inevitably is pushed, because no one really resigns from like a Barcelona or Real Madrid today. Premier League is so volatile. Gosh, I mean, you know what? I don't, mate. I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, Arsene Wenger at Arsenal left with a new stadium, I suppose. But if you look at the success post Arsene Wenger, it's not like they've gone on and won loads of trophies. They won way more under Wenger. So, oh mate, I don't know. That's really tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I almost think that adds to the mystique of the Klopp Liverpool era, doesn't it? It adds even more gravitas to it. Of everyone will go, well, maybe Klopp could have carried on, but he didn't, and he fell on his sword for us and for a $2.5 billion paycheck from Red Bull. So, he for all the humanitarian and sacrificial lamb reasons, Jurgen Klopp decided to walk away for us.
Red Bull, you can say what you want about Red Bull, Ollie. I don't think they're a human rights violation. Just
you never know. But please sponsor us, Red Bull.
It bloody works as well. I actually haven't had Red Bull in ages, but when you do have a Red Bull, the only thing you can say after having half that drink is, bloody hell, I feel pretty energized. So like they've done exactly what they set out to do. I ain't slagging off Red Bull, the Red Bull Empire. I tell you that, Wilson. Right, before we talk about the FA Cup, let's talk about the FA Cup now. 2 FA Cup semi-finals at Wembley. We can talk about whether they should be played at Wembley. In fact, let's do that first, Ollie. Should the FA Cup semi-finals be played at Wembley?
Not at all. The one of the rare times it was done, prior to the move to it being consistently done, was when Tottenham played Arsenal and the two teams lobbied for it to be at Wembley because they were both London clubs and they wanted that in the, I think it was 93-94 season. 92-93 maybe. And then the other semi-final was Sheffield Wednesday against Sheffield United, and they both said, well, if you're having your semi-final at Wembley, we should be able to have our semi-final at Wembley as well. So both semi-finals ended up at Wembley. And that was a rare occurrence, and that kind of felt right because it was 2 local derbies, and that should be it. The rest of it, you should never have a trip to Wembley by getting to the semi-finals of the FA Cup. It shouldn't be the way. And there are so many great grounds around this country that would be very well suited to putting on these games and putting on a show. And I think It's a shame we don't have Villa Park, we don't have Old Trafford, and there are other grounds that could be used if you really wanted to. So, Tottenham.
But you build Wembley. It was expensive, mate. They built it. It's there. It's sat there.
They're all expensive.
They got to use it.
Taylor Swift is selling out 10 nights of the year if she wants to, so we can just keep her coming back in. That's fine. Wembley's used for so much. Look at Tottenham Hotspur's an expensive ground. They're using it for more different things. Like, why not have that as a FA Cup semi-final venue instead? It doesn't hold the same capacity as Wembley, but it's a far better ground in terms of a viewing experience. It's 10 times better.
Because it's the FA Cup, and the FA want to make money.
Yeah, and I get that. But if you're dragging sides, say if we end up having a Newcastle-Sunderland derby in an FA Cup semi-final, not beyond the realms of possibility. Yeah, there would be an extent to going back to what I was talking about a moment ago with Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Tottenham and Arsenal playing their semi-finals down there. But wouldn't it make so much more sense for the fans who don't have to schlep all the way down to London? It's not like London's in the middle of the country and is an easy get to, particularly if your FA Cup finals on a Sunday. That Sunday isn't an easy get out of London, particularly if you're heading back north out of Euston or somewhere like that. You know, train timetables do make it a pretty insufferable journey for supporters, let alone maybe having to stay the night in London, stay over. You're adding up so much more cost onto the fan that could easily get down to Birmingham in a few hours as opposed to a 6-7 hour schlep from the north. It just needs to be looked at with a little bit of care about supporters more than anything else, doesn't it? I mean, isn't that what we learnt from COVID, that the supporters are the most important thing, and pumping in generic FIFA-esque crowd noise isn't the same as having an atmosphere. I mean, that's what we learnt this weekend with the Liverpool celebrations of winning a title and winning a title in front of a packed house of your adoring fans. It hits differently, and so we should know that having fans at these events is the best thing, and we should be helping out the supporters as much as anybody else.
All right, let's talk about the FA Cup semi-finals then. It's going to be a Man City Palace final. Ollie, Palace beat Villa 3-0. I watched this game. I mean, Palace could have scored 5 or 6, missed a penalty, missed a couple of other great chances. Mitchell missed a great chance. I think for Crystal Palace, it is absolutely insane to me that a club can go 119 years of history and not win a major trophy. I know they've won the second tier a couple of times, but the fact that you've got 119 years, I think it's 119, well over 100 years of history, and to have never won a major trophy. For a club like Palace, London club, like they're not a small club. You say Crystal Palace, people immediately think like Premier League, there or thereabouts. So that is just, I mean, what a day that's going to be on May the 17th for Crystal Palace at Wembley. Absolutely incredible. And yes, they're playing Manchester City, but they're not playing the vintage Manchester City of the last decade. So they've got a great chance. Glasner, the way he sets his side up, it's so smart, it's so clever. And I watched the Aston Villa side, Ollie, and I just thought, blimey, I mean, that's not a great Aston Villa side. And they're going from 1 minute you're in a Champions League quarter-final and you're pushing for the top 5 and you're in FA Cup semi-final. Next minute you're out the FA Cup. Top 5 now is looking pretty tight because lots of other sides around them are winning games. You're out the Champions League, and it could be a real poor end to the season for Aston Villa and make next season very difficult. And the summer transfer window if you're not in the Champions League. That's the big
key, is coming back from what was so near and yet so far, particularly in the Champions League quarter-final against PSG. You know, there was a point where you thought the miraculous comeback might be able to happen at Villa Park, and for players, you know, that's a huge come down to come off one of those nights. So I'm not saying the FA Cup semi-final isn't as big, like in terms of a big occasion and the possibility of winning silverware, as we've discussed many a time, it should be the priority. But the FA Cup has changed in people's minds quite dramatically over the last 10 years, 15 years, particularly from what it was, the last time Villa were ever really had a chance of competing for it, I imagine. But although they were in it actually a few years ago, weren't they? But anyway, so I just think coming down off a Champions League night is far too tough off that disappointment to then try and rally yourself against Crystal Palace side that, let's face it, have been unbelievably good in this second half of the season compared to what I think many people thought of them going into this campaign, and have been really good and a joy to watch in this FA Cup and this FA Cup run. So it doesn't surprise me Villa were always going to struggle to kind of get up for this one, even if the supporters were praying that they'd be able to make an FA Cup final. And the result, hefty manner of defeat, maybe a bit of a surprise, but I love the fact that Palace are in this. I really do. I think they're now the people's club. Do you not feel like for this competition?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have actually got a soft spot for Palace. Just, I don't know, their fan base or many people's favourite London club. Manchester City, I thought Pep Guardiola said something very interesting after the game. He said this a few times throughout the season, but I just think it shows the standards that he's set. Because he's asked in the post-match press conference again, if you finish top 5 and win the FA Cup, which is a probability at this stage, would it be a successful season? He was like, no, absolutely not. We can't confuse that with success. And it's like, wow. I mean, if they finish top 5, and let's be honest, finishing second and finishing fifth is pretty much the same. You didn't win the Premier League title, but you still qualify for the Champions League, right? So in the fullness of everything, finishing second, finishing fifth is the same thing. If you do that and win a trophy, I mean, that is a successful season for any club in the Premier League. Like if Liverpool won a trophy next year and finished fifth, that's another successful season for Arne Slot. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it just shows the standards he sets himself. And also, I don't want to make this too much of a sort of a gossipy outside of sport pod, but it's been noted that since Pep Guardiola's reconciled with his wife, there has been the uptick in form for Manchester City, which I thought was quite... Ollie's rolling his eyes. I'm just saying that there's an absolute correlation between Pep Guardiola sort of trying things again with his wife and City getting back on the right track.
I'm pleased for Pep and his family life and stuff. But what I find actually... It almost feels a touch insulting, that comment about it's not a successful season if it's top 5 and winning a trophy.
Yeah.
It feels very insulting to the FA Cup. And if you don't think it's going to be a success winning that piece of silverware, don't you dare smile and celebrate winning it if it's not a success. And don't bother turning up. If you don't care about it, don't... Honestly, like Palace fans do anything now to lift that trophy. Absolutely anything. It's so within their grasp. And a huge... century-old plus long run of not having a credible piece of silverware in the trophy cabinet. No disrespect to second-tier, third-tier trophies, but Palace fans would love to have a day where they can march the Holmesdale army all the way back to Selhurst with silverware in hand and celebrate with their team on the pitch and have that moment of a bus tour through their part of South London and Croydon and whatnot. I mean, it's just... So for Pep to then be like, well, it's not a success. Don't have a bus tour when you win it. Don't celebrate when you have it. Take the medal off. Do all that petulant stuff because it's clear that you don't care about it, and that's really sad to me. For fans of the club as well that would like to enjoy that moment, knowing that your manager's like, well, it's not a success, so is it? It's like, well...
I agree. Yeah, I thought it was a really old comment, as I say. There's no football club in the world that wouldn't see Champions League football, apart from maybe Real Madrid or Barcelona. You know, even Barcelona, trophy and Champions League football next season. It is a success. So I'm not quite sure where he's going with that, except to hold himself to absolutely impossible standards. Other football stuff, Ollie. Allow me to rant about 2 or 3 things. Dive in where you feel for it, see fit. The Copa del Rey final, El Clasico between Real Madrid and Barcelona. I've got a really great sense, Ollie, that we're going back to the dark, murky days of Mourinho trying to scratch people's eyes out and Ramos getting sent off every game and Ronaldo being involved and everyone calling it a disgrace. Like, I've got a very buoyant feeling that we might be wandering back to those days because Antonio Rudiger, and before I talk about this, of course, it's completely unacceptable, but he basically, Real Madrid... losing the last minute of the Copa del Rey final that was absolutely highly charged because Real Madrid weren't happy with the referee, and Real Madrid and referees is a topic that's been going on all season. Real Madrid's in-house TV channel did a whole thing about how this referee shouldn't be refereeing the game, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, final minute, Barcelona win the Copa del Rey, and Antonio Rudiger, Real Madrid's centre-back, grabs a water bottle, he's been subbed off, and he hurls it at the referee from the touchline. It's pretty punchy. Like, we both watched a lot of football and seen some like weird stuff, but in the days of the professional game, for Antonio Rudiger to have a water bottle and he hurls it 20 metres and doesn't miss the referee by much, by the way, is quite punchy. Obviously, he's later come out and apologised. Ollie, it's going to be a 2 or 3 month ban, I would have thought. You can't have players hurling objects at the referee because they don't like the decisions. It was pretty wild, man. It was a wild Copa del Rey build-up with Real Madrid kind of threatening all sorts and being who they are, which is the biggest, most successful football club in the world. Carlo Ancelotti's going to go, by the way. We're recording this on a Monday. Apparently, he might not even see the end of the season. Very intriguingly, Ollie, and I love a kind of mini curveball in football, he's going to become the Brazil national coach for the 2026 World Cup, which I think is a real fun one, man. To go, And what the life of a football manager, I'm going off on a tangent here, but the life of a football manager, 1 minute he's in Madrid. If he wins the Copa del Rey, still in with a chance at La Liga, all of a sudden he could do the double. Loses the Copa del Rey final. Next minute, he's on a flight from Madrid to Rio because he's taking charge of the Brazil national team, heading into the 2026 World Cup. So a wild life of a football manager. But yeah, El Clasico was nuts, and Ancelotti's going to be the next Brazil boss. Let me know.
Well, the next Brazil boss thing is
alarm's going
purely
off.
because of the food. Anybody that, and I think I've said this before, anybody that's read Ancelotti's books knows that the one thing he prizes more than almost anything else, aside from footballing success, is the ability to enjoy fine food and try various great dishes from around the world. And obviously the Brazilian restaurants come with the green and red stop go kind of for the meat servings. And Ancelotti's going to be sat there, in between weeks off the Brazilian national team job where he's scouting, just enjoying all the fine cuts of meat that you can find in Rio de Janeiro. And I've never been to Rio. I'd love to go. Apparently there is some superb meat feasts to be had in that city. So I think I know why Carlo's going. And obviously managing the Brazilian national team job, I mean, you think about it.
For a year as well, Ollie. That's what I love about it. It's a short-term contract. It's who was the Dutch lad, Gus Hiddink, that always used to parachute in.
But it's also you talk about managing Real Madrid, managing Manchester United in club football. The Brazil national team job is the Real Madrid of international football. And if you're trying to just tick off all of those boxes on the football management list, getting to do that it's the equivalent of coming to like a great golf course just to play like 9 holes to say, I ticked off playing St Andrews or something like that. It's that kind of with the 1 year contract. In, out, very few repercussions. I've come in, I'll potentially save the job. If I don't, it doesn't really matter too much because I'm Carlo Ancelotti and I've got enough credibility behind me that I can pretty much go anywhere anyway. But I can now say that I've managed the Brazilian national team along with all of the other credentials on my list. So yeah, and I love Carlo. I think whatever has happened with this Real Madrid side at the moment, and things haven't been great despite the amount of money they've spent and the talent that they have. I think Carlo Ancelotti is, he was always going to go down as one of the greatest football managers of all time anyway. And nothing's going to change that, whether he succeeds or fails with Barca and anything that's happening with Real Madrid right now.
And Ollie, if he does win the World Cup with Brazil, yes, Brazil won more World Cups than anyone with 5, and I think they're the only nation that have competed in every World Cup, etc., etc. But if he does win it, they haven't won it, mate, since we were young. 2002 is the last time Brazil won the World Cup. And if you think that, Germany last won it 2014, Italy won it 2006, Argentina 2022, France 2018, they haven't won it in a long time for the most successful side. And if he goes in and wins it, you really can make the case that he's the greatest football coach of all time. So I can see why he's... And if he doesn't, then it's it's not going to tarnish the fact that he's won so much success domestically. He's had so much success domestically. And at 65, you do get the sense it's, it's a bit of a fuck it, why not? Last throw of the dice.
Is the Rudiger moment more or less wild than the fire extinguisher Libertadores?
I think it's more wild, The fire extinguisher is great because it's such a niche prop. This was, for fans of Not Another Sports Pod in its previous form, Wilson and Windsor's Libertadores podcast. It's got to be pod number 8 or something. The true fans can go back into the archives and tell us. But basically,
Marcus
who was it? Yeah, of course. Grabbed a fire extinguisher. Is this in the aftermath of a Super Classico? Or was it just a game?
It was a game, I think, in the Libertadores, wasn't it? And it was in the tunnel. And he's
in the tunnel. He's in the tunnel outside a dressing room, and he's got a fire extinguisher as the 2 sets of players are clashing. He's looking for a weapon.
Which puts Fabregas Pizzagate to shame. That does. I threw a piece of pizza.
Yeah, again, I think it's because the game's going on that the Rudiger thing I found quite shocking watching in real time. I was like, bloody hell, the game's going on, you've thrown a water bottle at the ref.
Is there not also, though, and I'm not trying to give Rudiger the benefit of the doubt because he's obviously been an absolute moron here, but is there a chance that he's done one of those where you throw something in frustration and actually then you see where it's going and you're like, because we've all thrown something, or when you kick a ball, must have done this when you were young, you kick the ball away in frustration playing football and then you almost beamed somebody in the head and it diffuses the situation completely and all that. But yeah, it's You don't think you think he's purposely aiming?
No, it wasn't that, mate.
Because I've not seen
bottle
this.
trying to hit, without being inside his brain. He threw that trying to hit the referee. Well, I know exactly what you mean though about throwing something or kicking something or chucking something, and then a split second later be like, "Oh God, what have I done?" Happens in tennis with like when people clip the tennis ball away.
Yeah.
You know, like it's happened a few times. Like Tim Henman did it, and I think Djokovic. Like you hit a ball boy, you get disqualified. It reminds me of one of my first days in sports media, Ollie, and I was at ITN in central London. You know, you sort of first few days at the job, you're super nervous, looking to impress. And someone had been there a while. There was this office with probably like 50 like computers, loads of tech kit, microphones, and someone had been there a while at 11 at night. Was halfway across the office from me, and he goes, "Dave," and he sand-wedged a football over about 40 computers to me. And I remember thinking just then, like, obviously I was only a week into the industry, wow, that was risky. And like just keeping my head down and giggling about it. I'm not going to name names. I'll tell you after if you want who it was. But right, let me rant about some other stuff in the industry. And Postecoglou corner got to happen. Ollie, the guy has not looked directly at an interviewer or a camera in about 6 weeks. He is going inside himself. The post-match interview that Match of the Day did after the Liverpool game, honestly, mate, he's looking at the floor. It's actually really kind of worrying and sad to see. He can't make eye contact with the interviewer because he hates them all. He's embarrassed that they've been battered 5-1, could have lost 8-1, to be honest. And he's just looking at his shoes and presumably replaying the moment in his mind that will happen when Tottenham lift the Europa League trophy and he can stick two fingers up at everyone. I mean, he is so far within himself. He is so gone as a football manager. He is so sacked, but yet he has this lifeboat, you know, the Titanic sinking, and he's got this lifeboat on Thursday night against Bodo Glimt in the first legs at home for Tottenham. So, yeah, I mean, wild, man. The descent for Ange Postecoglou is just insane. I mean, he mutters, doesn't speak in full sentences anymore. He kind of grumbles and mutters, and he's looking at the ground, and God knows what the atmosphere is like within the football club. But Thursday night is the biggest night in Tottenham.
But if you know that you're done and you're going, like, Ange Postecoglou, I think, is also a guy that doesn't really suffer fools gladly. He knows that we know the score. He knows the score. Like, why bother with the pretense of being like polite at this point? Like, you know, be civil, do the interview and all that, and I'm sure he's not so sullen in terms of like he's not saying cheers or shaking hands or anything like that afterwards. But yeah, when you've been, there's something about that Tottenham management role that gets a lot of grief anyway. And I think what happened at the end of last season with the game win or lose, Arsenal win the title type thing against City, like, he got rubbed the wrong way a lot, not just by the fans, but I think by the media and how the media handled it. Because the media did a very good job of building a you against the fans attitude. And things haven't been right with interviews and press conferences since then, since the end of last season, more than anything else, even going into this season with all the troubles that Spurs have had under him. So I think Ange is a bit kind of like, sod you all, which I think is relatively understandable, to be honest. There's not many times that I will side with the manager a bit for being a bit sullen with the media, but there are certainly times when people in the media kind of take the biscuit a bit too much and run with a fun narrative that may not actually be as big as the media are trying to make it out. And I think that kind of happened at the back end of last season, and Postecoglou kind of had enough, and now the writing's fairly on the wall. I mean, I think we both believe that he's not going to stick around, regardless of what happens with the Europa League this season. So, yeah, why bother? Why bother with the pretense at this point? You know, if you knew you were leaving a job, that's why they give you gardening leave rather than making you stick around for another 4 weeks. Sure. Because it's like, well, you're not going to do much, so just go. You know, don't worry about it. So.
Something that's never happened before in the history of professional football, as far as my extensive research could tell, Ollie. For the first time ever in a professional match, two players over 40 years of age both scored in the same match. Paulo Guerrero and Hernan Barcos. This happened on April the 22nd, 2025, in a Copa Libertadores game between Alianza Lima and Talleres de Córdoba. And what can you say? Paulo Guerrero and Hernan Barcos both scored, and they're both over the age of 40 in the Copa Libertadores. Couldn't really happen in any other tournament in the world. Libertadores absolutely specialises in the old and the young players from in South America that haven't yet got their break to Europe, and the returning heroes. I think it's very rare. I mean, I looked at the Premier League for the oldest goal scorer, Ollie. It's Teddy Sheringham at 40 years of age for West Ham. I know that now 35 maybe is the new 30 in terms of footballers. You can keep yourself in great nick. It used to be 30 or over the hill. Now I think with the sports science and the physicality of the players and how they look after themselves, you probably can be 35 and still be at the very top. But I think it's going to be a very long time before that happens again in any other tournament. 2 players over 40 scoring in the same match, not just starting, but
Right,
scoring.
and as you say, I think there's only one competition in the world that it genuinely could happen in, or one continent at least where it could genuinely happen, and that would be in the Sudamericana or the Libertadores. I think you're forgetting about the revenue stream that can be made off this, which is the TV show, a spin-off of Golden Girls, Golden Goals, which is where you run through some of the greatest over 40 goal scorers in footballing history, and you run through South America. You go back to even the likes of someone like Teddy Sheringham, who still was able to score at the 40 plus age. And I think that's a little just niche off-piste documentary that can be go up on the Wilson and Windsor Sports Pod, or it'd be quite a good special pod to do, actually, of running through some of the best goal scorers who've scored after the age of 40.
And we'll try and get one of them on. Maybe we can get Hernan Barkos on the pod, and I'll do a.
I was going to say that's very much on you, that interview. I don't think me and Hernan are going to be able to interact too well. Poquito muy cansado, sí? Sí, poquito muy cansado, sí.
Oi, oi, oi! He's fluent. He's fluent.
He's feeling tired because he's over 40, and I'm feeling tired because I'm stretching all of my Spanish linguistical resources. Yeah.
Let me talk about one more thing about football, and then Ollie, I'll let you wrap up with any other business in the world of sport. This is just a 30-second, 60-second rant from me. The referee going to the VAR screen needs to end. End it. Finish it. It's theatre. It's comical. It's a waste of everyone's time. It's a joke. It's embarrassing. It's as bad as people putting on a COVID mask to walk in a pub, sitting down for 3 hours, taking the mask off, laughing and joking and spitting and screaming and shouting, then putting the mask on for the 5-metre walk back to the door. It is pure theatre. It's ridiculous. It completely undermines the referee's authority. The referees always go across to the screen. They always agree with the overlords, because how are you going to disagree with your boss that's hauled you across to the screen? It's a joke. It's a terrible reflection on the game. Just end it, end it, end it, end it.
Yeah, although there's a phrase there you've used, which I think is the crux of the problem, is how are you going to disagree with your boss that's overhauled you to the TV monitor? Well, that official in the booth at Stockley should never be the boss. The boss should be the man in the middle that the players can react and talk to, and that should be the man in charge. It's the problem with this VAR thing of having a second pair of eyes on it that may see it differently, particularly when it's slowed down to half a snail's pace and gone through frame by frame by frame. And then you've got that person going over to somebody else and undermining the person that actually has to deal with how they're managing the game on the pitch. And different referees manage games in different ways as well, and will let more things go to allow a game to flow freely, depending on what even the two teams are that are playing in that game, for instance. Sometimes in a big derby game, you don't want to slow things down and send somebody off early for a slightly rash challenge or something like that. Different referees will manage it in different ways. And if the guy upstairs is now considered the head honcho who's making the overall decisions and the puppet master that pulls the strings down on the pitch, you're interfering with how an official is trying to run the game in the best way that they see fit from what they're seeing and doing down there on the sideline, down there on the field. And that's a huge problem more than anything else. The pantomime of the referee going over, yeah, it's just a waste of time. It kills even more seconds. But in the grand scheme of the wasted time looking over VAR, it's a waste of time. The difference is that we're now, the problem is that now the clear and obvious has never been deemed as a clear and obvious. And we're overruling sometimes minutiae with a guy who's nowhere near the football field, the ground, the atmosphere and the intensity, and has no repercussions from the players on the field either, in terms of the lack of respect or tolerance that they will have for a way a referee is officiating a game. And that's a big problem, because if you're making decisions that, it's like the guy who's in the trenches in the military, who's then got the admiral back at home 50 miles behind enemy lines, who's saying, yeah, just keep pushing forward, that's what we've got to keep doing. And there's the guy who's actually in the trenches saying it can't be done this way because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, obviously I don't want to say that refereeing a football game is like being in the military, but you need to have the guy who's closest to the action being the person that's in charge.
And Ollie, so often, mate, they go across, let's say it's a pen that like could be a pen, maybe not, it's sort of a 50-50. They've made their decision, as you correctly say. They've had the context of the entire game. They know what fouls they've let go and what they haven't. They've made the call because they were 5 metres away from it. Then they're hauled across to the VAR screen from a group of people that are hundreds, thousands of miles away. Hundreds of miles away, probably. And
Stockley Park, Buenos Aires.
I'm talking about in the Libertadores, mate,
yeah.
for example. Like in the Libertadores, you've got a game up in Quito, but the VAR's down in Asunción or whatever it is, right? So it's like a long way away that are completely disconnected from the football game. And they come across and they look at the VAR screen and they're obviously told, oh, that's what you should be looking at. That's what you should be looking at. And you can almost see, you could like imagine the referee's brain turning and thinking, I don't actually think that's a pen, you know. I don't actually think that's a pen. But you've got your boss being like, well, we think that's a pen. We think that's a pen. You're not going to disagree with them. I mean, it happens like once in a blue moon somewhere, but it basically doesn't happen. So, yeah, it's a massive shame. Right, let's talk about other sport. Let's talk about the NFL draft then, Ollie, this prank call, and explain what happened, why it happened. Does this make the NFL draft interesting again? Because I know a couple of weeks ago you said you weren't interested.
Well, no, last week we were talking...
Well, that was the NBA draft.
It was the NFL draft last week, which I don't tend to take too much stock in. But when I'm right, I'm right. So I enjoy that as well in terms of what we had. We had 2 players coming out of Colorado, highly touted Tyler Huntley, who did go, ended up being the second pick in the draft. He wants to play both sides of the ball, offense and defense. But his quarterback at Colorado, Shota Sanders, who is the son of the great Deion Sanders that we were talking about. Again, there's this like Schadenfreude type thing of Shota Sanders doesn't go to the draft, even though he's expected to be a first-round pick, which means that he's going to be picked on Thursday night. Thursday night is the first round. Friday night is the second and third round. Sunday is any other business, basically. And he builds instead this kind of whole studio setup in Texas for himself, where he has a stand behind him with every NFL cap on it for each team. So whoever picks him, he can grab the right cap and be like, look, that's me. He's got, I don't know if this is his tagline or whatever, but legendary written off every single wall and piece of paraphernalia and his number and S and all that kind of stuff. And it's bigged up because he's like, I am going in the first round. I'm going early. I'm probably going to be the second quarterback off the board. It's the most important position in the NFL. This is my night. And then nobody takes him on Thursday night. And there's this big kind of, ooh, why is this happening? And I mentioned that he didn't go and work out for the NFL at the Combine. He didn't do private workouts in Colorado back at his university. And he didn't actually have a glowing report when it came to the interviews that he did either. And some people suggested that maybe there were teams that were interested in him and he tanked the interviews to hopefully not be drafted by them, which is a very dangerous game of like almost arrogance of a player being like, oh, I don't want to play for you. I want to go somewhere else. But he then fell out of the second round as well. He wasn't drafted on Friday. And then it suddenly became this weird thing where he's like live streaming to his followers the draft process of him being kind of sat almost what looked like in a chair at home, suddenly doing this whole when am I going to get drafted thing. And it's been a fascinating fallout of why this kid fell so far in the draft. And then all the other stuff that can come around, like the race discussion is coming out that like the white owners don't like the fact that he doesn't shy away from himself and he has attempted a rap career and he doesn't cut his hair to the Caucasian style and all this kind of thing, which could well be part of it. The owners in the NFL are white guys and may like to see that kind of, this is our line and you toe it type of attitude. I'm not necessarily suggesting that could be wrong. But there's also all of these things have started to come out from scouts who are now kind of reporting or openly talking under false aliases that we didn't like the fact that he couldn't do this, couldn't do that, wasn't ready for the NFL. And it's all because of this big social media Twitter hype train around Shota Sanders being Deion Sanders' son, starting quarterback, all this kind of stuff. And nobody actually went and looked at the analysis that scouts were doing on him, that he holds the ball for too long. He's in a system that is designed to make it easy to throw into large windows. He's got some big highlight plays, but throwing a Hail Mary to win a game isn't like a skill play. That's throwing up a prayer. I mean, it's why it's called a Hail Mary, because you just launch it as far as you can towards the end zone and hope somebody comes down with it. And it's what I mean about the NFL draft. And like, you can believe all the hype and discussion, but when it comes down to the analysis and breakdown, there are people that are going to have very different opinions about a lot of what you're seeing. And it's been a really interesting listen and view the fallout more than anything else of why he's dropped down the rankings. And look, he may turn into a great quarterback. He's ended up going to the Cleveland Browns, which I'm sure is somewhere that no quarterback wants to go to because they've got a very bad track record with their quarterbacks over the last 20 years, I'd say. Haven't really had a successful man under center. And it's a warning as well for, I think, these kids in college that are getting paid a lot of money now in college football and are, Twitch streaming all the time and earning money on the side doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, but if you want to have a successful career, it's about what these guys think about you in the NFL, not what 200 million fans in the US think. And it's been one of the biggest stories in the NFL draft to date. And there have been some big players that fell in NFL drafts. Dan Marino was falling down the order at one point before the Miami Dolphins picked him up. There was a young lad called Brady Quinn out of Notre Dame who was meant to go 3rd, 4th overall and ended up falling all the way to, I think it was 15th in the first round, but falling out of the first 4 rounds of the draft and taking in the 5th out of 7. It's a big shock to the system, and it'll be interesting to see what happens now with Schroeder Sanders, whether he kind of rallies from this and this is the kind of shock that means he gets his head down, or whether he kind of has the attitude of, well, I'm still Deion Sanders' son, I'm still Schroeder Sanders. And I hope for the best for him, to be honest, because he does have the potential to be a very exciting player. But I think it's a very stark reminder to young players around the league. And it's been the biggest story, I think, in the US over the last few days for sure.
Any other business? Chris Eubank Jr. beat Conor Benn, ended up in hospital, Chris Eubank Jr., which, I mean, boxing, man, what a wild sport. Just, I don't know. But yeah, that's an incredible story in its own right, by the way. Like the sons competing after the fathers did. Like it's just
and Eubank Senior turning up like unannounced to walk with him to the ring, which our friend Andy Clark was on commentary at Sky, character. And suddenly they cut to Eubank Jr. walking out of the dressing room and Senior's on his son's left shoulder. And Andy Clark, I mean, he's such a good commentator, particularly when it comes to boxing. And he just goes, wow, look who is alongside the son. And everybody in Wembley, at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, just the energy level went up another level because of that. And seeing the father kind of watching him, because he'd been very much on the side. Both Ben and Eubank Seniors have been very much on the side in the build-up to this. It was all about the sons and their rivalry. And yeah, it was cool to see them step in at the right moment. That's the timing of a showman, which only really someone like Chris Eubank is. There are boxers that know when to make a move in terms of selling a fight or selling the anticipation. And Eubank Senior was one of the very best at that in terms of a charismatic boxer who everybody knows the way he talks and the way he sold himself as a boxer, and obviously with the marketing side as well, with things like the silly Nescafe adverts when we were young and stuff. And it takes brains as well as brawn to be able to run that for you, whether it was help from elsewhere with marketing guys or he just knows, like, he's the showman. He's always come across very charismatic.
And also, Ollie, so many people now just manufactured, and obviously he was a different product of his era, but I mean, what a genuinely unique character. Like, no one told him to talk like that, in that kind of odd, how can you even describe it? It's just totally unique, like aristocratic, but it was just an unusual way of talking, and just incredible to have a character like that involved in the sport back in the day. I remember watching an old documentary on him and thinking, wow, like what a truly unique character that no one's told him to act like that. That is a completely, what he wears. And by the way, I don't want to get too sort of political on this pod, but like he was proved to be right about loads of stuff. I remember there's a point in whenever it was, like the Iraq wars, where he's protesting on the street saying, like, we shouldn't go to war. This is like, why would he do this kind of thing? Like, he was a boxer. He like led a protest, like an anti-war protest about how Tony Blair shouldn't have gone to war because there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. And then like later he was found out to be correct about loads of stuff. I don't know. Just a very unusual character. And I mean, that is just an unbelievable sports story with the two sons competing. Just quickly, while it's in my head, while I don't forget, Ollie, I think Diego Simeone could probably make a case that he's left Atletico Madrid better than he found them after a long stint, depending on when he leaves and the position they're in. Not quite the same as Jurgen Klopp, but something like that. And also Wrexham go up to the Championship. What do we think about that? I mean, on one hand, it's the fairy tale. You're a Wrexham fan. Bloody hell, you could never expect it this year. In Dreamland, on the other hand, they've just kind of bought their way up the pyramid. I mean, where do we sit on those two things?
It's interesting because, again, you want to talk about charismatic showman, like Rob McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds have made everybody forget almost about the amounts of money that have gone into getting Wrexham flying up the league. And obviously the documentaries helped with that as well and created the popular opinion around what's been happening for Wrexham over the last few years. But it is very interesting how a bit of marketing and a bit of charisma can make everybody forget that this is not almost the way that you want to see football being done in terms of shooting up a table like that and shooting up the Football League, and it's the lower league equivalent of a Manchester City, and who knows what will happen now in the Championship. Bigger revenue, more eyes. I mean, I know CBS has put in a new deal with the EFL, which is a much bigger deal, and this is only going to pump even more eyes onto the Sky Bet Championship next year, which is great for the league, obviously, and it's going to send it to the US now with actually a big continental following with their fan base of football and obviously the Disney Plus doc. It's also a bit sad because I don't think there are many teams that I've covered this year who have had problems off the pitch with owners where they're not linked to selling to a consortium that are looking to put together a documentary, or the term inspired by what Wrexham have done has become used in the narrative of telling that story of new owners coming in potentially. And it is just showing that more and more clubs are starting to sell to big money investors who think they can be the next Wrexham. And if everybody's trying to be the next Wrexham, it's very difficult to be the next Wrexham because no one wants to be third in this race. You can be first and second. First sets the tone and everybody tries to copy it. Second has a bit of success in the same way. Third is last at this point, because then it's everybody fighting on top of each other to create money and create success. And that is going to leave a lot of clubs potentially in the next 30 to 40 years in a very problematic position. There are going to be some big long-term ramifications for clubs that don't find that success, and American investors go, we're not doing what we want, so we're going to get out, bail out, and cut our losses. It's a touch worrying, but you can't just buy success at the same time. You have to put it all together. You have to have the correct management staff, the correct group of players.
And they've kept the manager. Obviously, they've changed the side a lot, and every time you go up, you have to be realistic about the size that the players that got you up and the players that are going to get you up again, right? But they've kept Parkinson in charge, right? So they've kept him up the pyramid.
I've never heard a Wrexham player leave Wrexham going, "Oh, it was horribly ruthless." They understood more than anything else that they were right in that level of football, League Two, National League, wherever. But they've also very much enjoyed being part of that process. And so I think that says a lot about, again, how it's been run and how well it's been run. I think it also has to be run that well because you've got things like a Disney documentary looking at you, and you don't want to have suddenly, former Wrexham player comes out, they're absolute SOBs, they're this, they're that, they're too brutal, all this. I mean, it's just, yeah. But as I say, you can't actually buy that level of success. That something still has to go right.
I was going to, we talked about Real Bedford last week or a couple of weeks ago, Ollie. And when you're at the very lower end of the pyramid, it's kind of easier, right? With the money, like 10 million here, 5 million here, you can absolutely race up that pyramid. But in the Championship, I mean, even if they put 100, 200 million in, there's no guarantee, right? Because of the competitive nature and because there's so many massive football clubs in that division. So it's not, I mean, for example, if you had to predict now, how many years in the Championship do you think it would take for them to go to the Premier League?
3, at least. Minimum of 3, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, probably.
That league is A, a step up, and B, it's a league that so many great clubs get lost in for a long period of time, and yeah, it's difficult to put your finger on. But yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's still a fun story for football. It'd be interesting to see what happens if they ever get into the Premier League as well. I mean, that would be an incredible culmination of what almost seems like a drunk bar investment, doesn't it? Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhaney, had too many drinks after filming.
Let's buy a pub, kind of thing.
Let's buy a small team in Wales. Yes. Just another little football shout out. I know it's not massive news for a lot of people, but the National League North, Billericay getting promoted to the Vanarama National League for the first time in 37 years, I think it is, which is impressive. But I want to take you to what might be the greatest final day of a footballing season in the National League South, where the final table, the top 4 are separated by a point. Torquay in second, 89 points, scored 73, conceded 42. Truro, league winners, 89 points, scored 75, conceded 42. They won the league on a 2-goal difference to get into the Vanarama National League, which, compared to the North and South, the National League is that huge step up. It's a big... There's only 5 semi-professional sides this season in the National League. Everybody else is a pro team now. And sides like Truro, Chelmsford, Farnborough, they're still semi-professional. So going into suddenly a almost professional ranking league now is a big step up. But that might be one of the best finishing tables that you'll ever see in English football. 2-goal difference separating the top 2, and then 1 point separating the top 4. It's anybody's game on the last day of the season. That's incredible.
That's the beauty of the sport. No VAR, where like every goal can be properly celebrated as well at that stage. All right, let's I'll let Wilson get back to the golf course or whatever he's doing. Oh, one thing, London Marathon, most finishers ever for a marathon with over 55,000 beat New York. And this blew me away, Ollie. In 2025, do you know how many people applied? Considering it's 26.2 miles and pretty nasty, over 800,000 people applied to take part in the London Marathon, and they're anticipating in 2026 over 1 million people applying to run the London Marathon. I mean, that is crazy numbers to do something which is incredibly difficult. So yeah, for all I could slag off London. Why are you
started this podcast by slagging me off, saying I'm not going to be able to complete the 36-mile challenge, and it's like this kind of and now we're having this.
Ollie,
congratulations!
100 goals.
Congratulations,
Ollie. You said 100 holes of golf are harder than the marathon. Is that what Mr. Oliver Wilson's saying on?
Think about how many of those finishers walked the majority of the London Marathon and didn't have to swing a club or carry a bag. And I'm doing 10 miles more.